Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. My name is Winback, and on today's episode we're going back to Grim Dawn for a build that I've been enjoying a lot recently that I wanted to share. This is the Spellbreaker. The Spellbreaker is an Arcanist and Nightblade build, and this one in particular is focused on room-ending AoE damage while freezing everyone, holding them in place in these cold damage whirlpools, and zipping in and out using the Nightblade's Shadow Strike ability to avoid a lot of big damage, or do a lot of big damage depending on how we're feeling. Now, we are obviously in the ultimate tier difficulty of the game. Resistances are as high as I can get them currently, and we are doing some searching for gear as far as this video is concerned, but for the most part this build is fleshed out, and regardless of anything else that I find that will really push those niche instances of damage and utility, there isn't going to be a whole lot that we have to do, so I am going to give you everything that I've got so far so that you can copy this build. As always, the Grim Tools is down in the description below if you are the kind of person that needs that thing, but hey, strap in, we got plenty to talk about. Now, for the purposes of the ease of climbing when it comes to this build, that early game push for the Spellbreaker is going to focus on the Flash Freeze ability, meaning that you are going to want to pick up Arcanist first. I know that seems a little bit silly, even though I've been saying on this channel for literally ever that I don't like the Arcanist. It's because of the Aether Ray that I don't like the Arcanist. Flash Freeze is perfectly fine with me. It is a room-ending, huge nuke that freezes and does cold damage. It's fantastic for early game clearing out and even late game clearing out because rooms are just densely packed in this game. So what you'll want to do is get that mastery bar up quick, head over to Flash Freeze as quick as you can, and start dumping all the points that you can into that thing, at least until you've maxed it out. You're also going to want to pick up the modifier for it, the mastery, which is absolute 0, which just increases the cold damage that it's doing, reduces physical resistance to enemies hit, and adds some frostburn damage too. All that being said, Flash Freeze is ridiculously powerful, and you can equip it with Tsunami on top of everything else to fire off even more cold damage through your devotions. If you have Alexa's Flash Freeze equipped with Tsunami, you get a 35% chance on attack for those waves to fire off, dealing the cold and lightning damage that they do. Also, they fumble, so they can silence and blind enemies as well. So anybody getting hit by the Tsunami has a percent chance to get all their abilities ruined or just not even hit you because they're blinded, which is fantastic. So Tsunami and Flash Freeze work really well together, and you're going to want to put those two together because later on Ring of Steel will need a different devotion. But more importantly, on the Arcanist tree, we have got nothing else to activate apart from Mirror of Arioctes. Mirror of Arioctes is the best invulnerability button in the entire game, and I will stand by that because I can 100% say it is the only button on the Arcanist class that I like more than Flash Freeze. So there you have it. If you're only picking Arcanist for one thing, make sure it is Mirror of Arioctes. This is going to 100% make you invulnerable for a 3-second duration, and you get lightning retaliation on top of that. I think it's damage absorption instead, but you're basically invincible. You can't be killed while you have the mirror active. It is on a huge cooldown though, so remember it's about 30 seconds for a 3-second shield. Remember, only use it when you really need to. The passives on the tree that we want to pick up, though, are going to be, number 1, the exclusive ability all the way down at the end called Star Pact. Star Pact is going to give you cold, lightning, frostburn, and electrocute damage while converting 15% of your physical damage into cold, and almost 50% of your Aether damage into cold, with a 12% skill cooldown reduction at level 16. This is a very strong ability for the damage types that we're going for, so max out Star Pact once you get down to the end of the line. You'll also be picking up Maven's Sphere of Protection and adding a couple points into Conversion as well. You don't have to max this one out. I dropped it right about 7 points, and with that I get 17% damage absorption from the shield that is always on. And with the points into Conversion, we get reduced stun duration, reduced freeze, petrify, entrapment, and slow resistance. So all of that is the same percentage, but at 4 points into Conversion, you're getting 17% reduced stuff. So that's really good. The ability itself is incredibly good for defensive, squishy people like us, and I would definitely recommend picking it up. As many points as you can stomach, because there are going to be other skills that need them more. You will also want to pick up Iskandra's Elemental Exchange. This is going to be a toggleable ability, and while we don't need more than 1 point into the base passive itself, you're going to put quite a few points into Overload, which is the second modifier on this ability. The reason that you're doing that is because the Aether resistance built into Overload is very handy. If anything, Grimdawn is the type of game that makes sure that your resistances are well stacked, because you will get absolutely slapped if they are not. Unlike Diablo 4, resistances work exactly as they are advertised in Grimdawn, so make sure to get the points into Overload if you haven't already gotten enough gear to get the Aether resistance built up and maxed out on its own. You can also put points into Elemental Balance, because that will increase crit damage and add some damage into Frostburn for this build. It's worth, I think, a point or two, because gear that you get along the way will also drop a couple points in there for you, making the damage a little bit more than negligible, a little bit better to use. Now, as far as just straight up passives go in the Arcanist tree, we have got number 1, Inner Focus. This is going to increase your spirit by a percentage, as well as your offensive ability by a percentage. The reason that is so important is because this build wants to deal critical hits, and in order to do that, we have to have more offensive ability than the defensive ability of the enemies that we're hitting. So Inner Focus is giving you a percentage increase to offensive ability, and Spirit in and of itself is also giving an increase to offensive ability. So this is an incredibly strong ability, and we don't even have to take the full maxed out amount. You can get away with about 5 points into Inner Focus if you really want to. 7, I would say, is, you know, right about the medium range to feel really happy with it. But honestly, if you go ahead and max out Inner Focus, all the points that you can get into it, 12, and then any gear that you find that pushes that further, this is nothing but pure damage ability for your class. So the more offensive ability that you have, the happier you will be. And like I said, if you want to put all your points into Inner Focus, go for it. I've got quite a few points left to go in this build after we unlock them all through quests and what have you, and I'm pretty sure they're going into Inner Focus. The other passive ability on the Arcanist tree is going to be Mental Alacrity, and this is a fantastic ability for anyone who has problems with energy consumption. This build does run a little bit heavy on the energy, especially earlier on in the game, so Mental Alacrity gives you a 500 energy boost. It increases your casting speed, not that that's super important, but you're also going to get a reduction about 10% in skill energy cost. So when you press a button, you're paying quite a bit less than you would have earlier on. Yet another ability I think that is incredibly handy, and if you are one of those Aether Ray players, you probably know what I am talking about. Now on the Nightblade side of things, there are quite a few abilities waiting to be picked up too, so let's talk about Ring of Steel first. Ring of Steel is going to be the alternate AoE nuclear button in this kit, and apart from Flash Freeze, Ring of Steel will be doing cold damage as well with one of its modifiers. Now, Ring of Steel, you're going to want to max this out as soon as possible. Get as much damage in there as you can after Flash Freeze is done. This is a little bit later on the Nightblade tree, so make sure to dump as many points into the mastery bar as you can handle. But get Ring of Steel going, make sure that you've got that working in conjunction with Flash Freeze, and you'll be doing boatloads of damage. Ring of Frost is what is going to change all of the damage from piercing to cold for your Ring of Steel, and it's also going to allow your Ring of Steel to freeze enemies hit for about 3 seconds. It is pretty gross how well this ability works, and especially for cold builds, it is just chef's kiss. You'll also pick up the Circle of Slaughter mastery for this ability. It's going to add bleeding damage to it, but really what you're worried about is the increase in crit damage up to about 40%. It's going to add pierce damage, it's going to buff pierce damage, sorry, for Ring of Steel as well, which, since it is being converted, that increase in pierce damage is now an increase in cold damage, which is, again, chef's kiss. The cherry on top is that Circle of Slaughter gives you a 38% chance to fumble target or enemy attacks for 5 seconds. Enemies that are fumbled are basically silenced. They can't use abilities for that period of time. So anybody getting hit by that is going to have a bad time. You know what I'm saying? Now, the other really important ability on the Nightblade side of things that doesn't have to be maxed out, but you still do want a decent chunk of points into it, is going to be Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike is piercing and cold damage along with some weapon damage, and the more important part of this is that Shadow Strike is going to warp you into the enemies that you are clicking on and deal some good damage. It also stuns the target that you hit for a short amount of time, but it is a very big mobility tool, and you can use it to get in and out of some very sticky situations. You'll also want to take Nadala's Justifiable Ends. This is going to decrease the cooldown of your Shadow Strike, but it's also going to add some poison damage to it, as well as give it some increased crit damage. Those two things are good for offense's sake, but again, remember your Shadow Strike can also be used to get away from things, because you can right-click on things like pots or really tiny bad guys who are really far away. So if you're getting clapped on by a big bad boy, you can use a little bad boy to get away. Your Nightfall is the last thing that you'll want to take for Shadow Strike, and Nightfall is going to add even more cold damage, as well as some vampiric attack coupled with frostburn damage. And this is all in an AoE. The AoE for Nightfall is about as big as a Ring of Steel. It gets bigger the more points that you put into Nightfall, so you're going to want to put more points in there to make this more useful, but Nightfall also has a chance to put the target to sleep for 3 to 5 seconds. In an AoE, having a CC like that is very, very good, but also the Nightfall itself is going to be helpful in proccing our Whirlpool Celestial Power from Leviathan. Leviathan is my favorite devotion of all of them in the entire tree, and any chance that I get to use it and make it happen more often is the best. You do have a 30% chance on attack with your Shadow Strike to activate Whirlpool, and that is pretty easy considering that Nightfall makes the Shadow Strike an AoE attack, and it just all around pops up any time that you really want to activate it. Whirlpool from the Leviathan, is going to have a 6-second duration. It is going to be dealing cold and frostburn damage, as well as slowing anybody caught in the Whirlpool as well. So that means that the Whirlpool has a bigger chance to hold people in there while it's dealing all of the good damage. That said, Ring of Steel and Shadow Strike are your big 2 activatable abilities for the Nightblade tree, so once you have those, you should be dealing monster damage. The other activatable that you can pick up that is not necessarily required because you have Mirror of Arioctes, but its counterpart in the Nightblade kit is called Blade Barrier. The reason I take both of these is because this character is incredibly squishy compared to some of the big bad bosses in Ultimate, and having a second panic button is a very, very good idea. So we pick up Blade Barrier and we pick up Mirror of Arioctes to make sure that we don't die randomly for some stupid reason. That being said, Blade Barrier also does give you a whole bunch of health regen while you are standing still, having all of your damage absorbed, so you can heal while you are blocking all that incoming insane garbage. Now, as far as passives go for your Nightblade kit, you're going to want to pick up your Veil of Shadow. Veil of Shadow decreases enemy offensive ability, reduces speed, and the modifier is going to allow it to deal cold and frostburn damage while reducing cold resistance, pierce resistance, and then poison and acid resistance. Night's Chill is the big reason that you want this passive, that reduction in cold resistance, but Veil of Shadow in and of itself, reducing offensive ability, just means that you are going to be harder to hit, which is fantastic. You'll also equip the Celestial Power of Giant's Blood, which is incredibly good defensively speaking, and it has a 15% chance to go off when you get hit. Basically, when this happens, you'll get 20% of your health restored, along with a flat 1200 health on top of that, and you get 440 health regen per second while under the effects of Giant's Blood. If you're like me, you run directly into groups of enemies and you will get hit, so having this power activate pretty often is it's good. It's good for keeping you alive, and if we're being honest, playing squishy characters, it's not my favorite thing in the world, so this makes me feel much more tanky, and that devotion is 100% worth it. It is the behemoth, the devotion that you'll need to take. Next up on the passive list is your Phantasmal Armor. This is going to give you 10% energy absorbed from enemy spells, which goes to really boost that energy bar along with your mental alacrity from the Arcanist set. But Phantasmal Armor is also going to give you a big chunk of just flat armor, give you a huge amount of pierce resistance. It's going to reduce your freeze and petrify durations by quite a bit, and you do have a 33% chance to get some energy leech retaliation. If you don't know what that means that when an enemy hits you, there is a chance that you will get a whole bunch of energy into your bar from being hit by them. So that's fantastic, and it's going all the time because it's just straight up passive. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, there is one more activatable button, and that is Pneumatic Burst. Pneumatic Burst is a fantastic button, and it's just a heal button. It really is going to give you a big percentage of your health back. You're going to get offensive ability, you get health regen, and you get a bunch of speed on top of that too. The ability itself is very good just for activating as often as possible, whether you are missing health or not, though I would recommend hitting it when you're unhealthy rather than hitting it when you're healthy. You'll also want to take points into Shadow Dance, because Shadow Dance increases your defensive ability and gives you a bigger chance to avoid melee and projectile attacks. That means that you're harder to hit, and those are two stats that you can get more of in gear. So you can get dodge and deflect chance in your gear, and those will instantly be made better by Shadow Dance because it comes with a built-in dodge and deflect, as long as the ability itself is active and going. It has a 24-second duration and an 8-second skill cooldown, so I just gonna work all the time basically, as long as you're hitting the button to keep it up. And that about does it for all the abilities. As far as the Spellbreaker goes, everything I can share with you on those trees is all set. Hopefully you were paying attention, or you at least know where to go to click on to get that tree. Now, we did get some devotions out of the way, but I do want to press some of the other devotions, honorable mentions here as well. You're going to pick up Amatok, the Spirit of Winter. and that is what you are going to equip to your Ring of Steel. Ring of Steel has a better chance with getting crits as far as activating Blizzard goes. So Blizzard has a 100% chance to activate on critical attack, and that is much easier to do with the Ring of Steel. You'll also be picking up Chariot of the Dead. The Wayward Soul is going to be equipped to Maven's Sphere of Protection. This means you have a 20% chance whenever you get hit to have 12% of your health restored, with a flat 1500 on top of that, along with some armor and defensive ability. You'll be picking up Kraken just to get up to Amatok and fill out a lot of the devotion legs of the journey as well. You do want Hammer of the Hammer and Anvil fame. You'll pick up Spider as well. You want Scholar's Light for some elemental damage too. Your Empty Throne is also very good for defensive stats there. Toad as well for both the purple and green modifiers that you're getting, along with some spirit increases. And like I said earlier, all of this is ultimately to get down to Leviathan and then make sure that we can take Behemoth, at least partially completed, to get Giant's Blood as our defensive big boy devotion ability. There is quite a bit to go over in this build, but hopefully that's laid out everything at least to a usable frame of reference for you. If you want the gear, I would definitely check out the Grim Tools link, because the only really big important piece of gear that I can mention to you is going to be Elena's necklace. And that is because that is giving some base cold and frostburn damage to Veil of Shadow and Star Pact, along with a health increase to Star Pact of the 8% variety. There are other things going on here, like the Soul Rend's two-handed scythe, but that is more of an aesthetic choice. It is dealing the right kinds of damage, it's giving the right points in the right places, but I don't necessarily think that it is a critical piece of the build. If you want more of the Grim Dawn build guides, feel free to let me know down in the comments, but we should have more of these coming back around as the D4 content slows down, because that game is... ooh, it's trying my patience. It is for sure trying my patience. But that's it for me, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. I will see you all next time. Peace out.